So you haven't had too much impact via COVID down there, Judy, right?
No, we have had, I think, a total of like 23 cases, no deaths.
23 cases?
Mhm.
Wow.
No deaths, and right now we've had no cases for like about the last 3 months.
Can you remind Judy, the audience, where you're located right now?
I am in Grenada in the West Indies, in the Caribbean. It is one of the most southerly islands in the Caribbean. It's very close to Trinidad and Tobago, and so it's like about 30 minutes from Trinidad by flying and about 45 minutes from Barbados. And we are 3 islands that make up the state of Grenada. So it's Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. Those are 2 smaller islands that you have to take either a boat or a plane to get to.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you so much for joining us from all the other side of the world here.
My absolute pleasure to be here.
Mm-hmm.
That's excellent. Well, Samit here is from India. So we're all over the world.
Yeah. We are smaller than we think.
Yes,
that is well said.
Today even more so, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I wish our world leaders believed that. Some of them seem like they don't get that.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Well, that's why we have to lead from within.
That's right.
So we have to lead.
Definitely up to us to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, seems like the hurricane season this year has been quieter in the Caribbean. Have you had any even close calls over there? Yeah.
No major storms this year. However, I know we have until November.
Yeah.
So hot, and the heat really does make for a good season. So we are keeping our fingers crossed that we don't have anything at all. We've had a little bit of like storms, but not really, like couple wind storms, but nothing really major. So it's just some rain and that's it. But we're hoping that the rest of the season continues like that, because I don't know if we can deal with a hurricane on top of the pandemic, because some of the islands are really getting hit really bad with COVID cases.
Yeah,
if they allowed Americans in, probably particularly.
You know, most of the Caribbean islands are close to the US and the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are close to the US and the UK. But
yeah.
I was talking to a friend of mine this morning in Jamaica, and they are now like over 5,000 cases, because they now have community spread, and probably around 70 deaths so far.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, but I think we hit 200,000 yesterday in the United States.
Oh
so
my.
we lead 1 out of 5 deaths from COVID is here.
You know, the thing is that amount of that would have wiped out our island, because we are like 109,000. So we would have been wiped out about twice.
That's amazing. Yeah. What do you do? I know you're going to talk about that, more officially a little bit later, but what's your role in business there? What business do you run?
I have a consultancy company. We work specifically directly with businesses, and we do strategic planning for them. We do some training. We have training and development going on. We do job evaluations, HR audits, and any kind of organizational redesign work that they may have. So if they want to look at changing over their corporate structure and different things like that, we do that.
What's the biggest industries that really are thriving in the area? Is it tourism centric?
But tourism is our main thing. But right now it's completely dead because we have no visitors. Hotels aren't open. We should be reopening on October 1st, but I don't know because they've been saying we will be opening for a while now. But so it's tourism. That is our mainstay really. Since the pandemic, I think that they're going to be looking at agriculture and looking at the blue economy and other areas that we are not so heavily dependent on tourism. But we have, but yeah, tourism really is our biggest mainstay.
I noticed that there were a lot of goats when I was down there. Maybe there's something to be done with that. My friend and I were having such a funny time. Like the goats basically are long, right?
You know, I asked that question recently. I saw it and I asked, like, what do they do with these goats after a while? But I think that there was a goat dairy project where they were making goat cheese and goat milk and stuff like that. So
They're eating a lot of grass, so
and then
turn that into a product.
Yeah, and then they will eat the meat also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have good food? Good
So,
food in your
so
area?
Judy,
Uh-huh.
Do you have good food in your area? Like restaurants or?
Yes. We do have the food here is really good. And you have a lot of restaurants that will do like a fusion, but then we have we have some really good Indian restaurants here, like really, really good. Indian and Mexican is really my favorite, my two favorite dishes. And we have some really good Indian restaurants there.
A lot of fish.
Yes, definitely. You can't be on an island and not be eating loads of fish. And that's all I eat because I don't eat meat at all.
Yeah.
very healthy. And I understand, Judy, you have some passions and you do some volunteer work. Is that right?
Yes, I am a member of the Rotary Club of Grenada, and I just demit office as president of our club, and I'm also the resource mobilization chair for the Red Cross, for the Grenada Red Cross. So I do as much volunteer work as I possibly can do.
Great, thanks for that.
Yeah, I actually love doing volunteer work. I always say that when I get extremely rich, I'm going to dedicate the rest of my time to doing volunteer work.
Yes. That's I think it would be my dream too. I mean, you don't have to worry about your own means, and if you can just give back and have fun doing it. It's definitely
I volunteer to come down and be your assistant. Sorry, Sam.
no problem. We're getting towards the top of our hour here, so I'm excited for our conversation today. So I know you're going to talk a little bit about you have an event that you're hosting coming up, Judy, and so we're excited to hear about that. And unfortunately, I know that typically this is a live event, but you're going to have to do it online this year.
Yes, online, yeah. But we have to adjust just like everybody else have had to.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's the whole reason we started these forums, is because we adjusted to online versus in person. So That's how this
Mhm.
whole people strategy was born.
You know, and it's really nice to have the global reach being out. You know, we met Sumit that way, and of course you as well, Judy. And so and that's a big thing. I mean, one of the big drives I've been trying to do is to bring all the different partners together. And I know that Judy, you're a member of the Great Art Partnership. That's correct, right?
Yes,
Great Art.
yes.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah,
hey, it's
so
the top of the hour,
it's good.
so I'm just so happy to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on our People Strategy Forum here at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. So wherever you are in the world, welcome. And we've just been having a great time over the last several months hosting these forums. So hello, my name's Shar Miller, and I am your host today. And I am a people strategist, and also I do career coaching called HR with a Heart. A lot of people are changing their careers during this transition. And also I own a company, a health advocacy company called Rocky Mountain Health Advocates. And I have had the absolute pleasure of working with Sam Reeve, who's the founder and CEO of CompTeam. And he and his outstanding team have been sponsoring and co-hosting these people strategy forums that has been absolutely fantastic. And Sam provides rewards and compensation initiatives. So if you're looking for help with that, his company has some amazing solutions in that regard. Also, just been a pleasure to partner with Lisa Jackson, and she is a culture and employee expert, experience expert, and also the founder of Corporate Culture Pros. And so when you talk about your culture, she will really be able to help you analyze what's happening in that and give you some amazing solutions. And then also Sumit Singla is also a people strategist. And as you can see with his background, he's specialized in organizational design, well-being, all kinds of strategic thinking when it comes to people strategy. So the four of us have been really working together and creating these people strategy forums. And so also we have an amazing guest today, Judy McCutcheon, organizational redesign consultant. I love this badass impact coach. She helps women find their voices and thrive as a global contributor. And so she'll go into more information about her expertise, but she is an excellent addition to our speaking today. So thank you so much, Judy. And before we get into a kickoff, I just want to go over a few of the logistics that we have here in our People Strategy Forum. So you'll notice that we keep these People Strategy Forums very engaged, very conversational. We would love for you to participate if you are able to join us live today. Please participate in the chat. Let us know you're here. We'd love to see that you have some thoughts, ideas, questions, or any types of topics that you'd like to talk about. So please engage. Also, you'll see there's a Q&A. If you have a specific question, my team will be monitoring and watching that. All of us will be jumping on and seeing what kind of thoughts you have. And also, we have a poll. So in the poll is really your opportunity to let us know if you'd like to have 15 minutes with one of us. 15-minute conversation, just a short phone call, and it could turn into more of a dialogue, but that'll at least get you started. So if you're interested, just check the box and we'll follow up with you. And then throughout the conversation today, we'll talk about something called the TMA assessment, which is a talent portal. It's a process to identify talents, preferences, skill set, competencies. It's an amazing tool, and I have to tell you, it's really made a difference in my personal company. So if you'd like to give that a try for yourself, please sign up for that free access, and we'll be happy to give you that. You can also just minimize that poll. So also at the end of our forum today, please share. We are all on LinkedIn. We are all over social media. Please share with your colleagues, business leaders, other HR professionals, people strategy leaders. We have the most progressive, innovative, thought-provoking ideas around talent management strategy that you'll ever find. And this is a free resource to all of you and your business colleagues. So please share. So let's go ahead and talk about our discussion today. Today, we are going to talk about designing cultures to retain your top performers. So retention is very critical right now and during these challenging times. And we're going to talk about some strategies to address that challenge. Also, how to retain and engage your workforce with development opportunities. And I think employees expect to work for a company that helps develop them and think about their career mobility and success. So we have some great strategies with that. And then we're going to wrap up with conversations, questions, and dialogue. So please interact. So let's go ahead and get started. I think, Lisa, you're going to start us off around culture and retaining our top performers. So Lisa, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Char. Thank you. Doing well for the hump day of the week.
Hump day in September.
Yeah. So I think Sam said that I'm going to make him hungry with my slide. Or that I was making him hungry.
Food.
So hopefully not all of you are running to your refrigerator. You can take a couple minutes to listen here. So I was thinking about this subject of retention because in the work I do on culture, there is this often this narrative around culture, especially if I'm part of the conversation as in given what I do. Our culture needs to change. Our culture needs to evolve. Our culture is a problem. There's this narrative around culture that acts as if it is its own entity. And I wanted to use a metaphor that I like to share with my clients. If you went to a restaurant where the food was bad and you could see that the waiter tried their best, do you blame the waiter for the food? No, but you take it out on them, right?
Right.
And would you go back to that restaurant? Probably not in this day and age where there's a lot of choice, unless it's literally the only restaurant in your town. So this is the same issue that defines retention in every organization today, that retention is the result of it's the food. It's the result of two forces. And when those forces are aligned and transparent and consistent, it really translates to a meaningful experience for your employees. And that experience either generates trust or it generates mistrust. And while trust and mistrust are not necessarily binary points, they're a continuum, that it's really that simple. That if people feel safe, if they feel like they are allowed to speak up and they trust their leaders to guide the organization, you're going to have a culture that retains more people. And it is the outcome of what leaders do and say. So leadership is the foundation of every organization, and your culture is a reflection of what your leaders believe and do. The decisions they make about the business, right? The execution of decisions that employees or customers see and respond to. Leadership decisions and actions create the quality of the food. So by the environment they create for the food makers and the servers, that's what your culture is. So it's the outcome of this process, not a separate entity. And I think a lot of you would agree with that assessment. I just think a lot of times we use language that suggests that the culture itself is the problem, when really we have to back up a little bit and go, the reason culture changes so difficult and often fails, and I will tell clients this, that if you're trying to change culture, understand that a large number of those efforts fail. And I think over 20 years of seeing, honestly, those failures, the most visible outcome isn't going to change substantially, culture, unless the leaders and the systems and the processes change.
And wouldn't you say, Lisa, during this time, I would say the restaurant industry in general is really hard hit, because not only do they have to address the fact that they're trying to get that 5-star rating, they're trying to be perceived in the community as an excellent restaurant, safety-wise, food-wise, but also now during the pandemic, they have all these safety protocols and how to take care of their customer, as well as their employees, as well as their culture. So would you not say that right now the challenge is even increased even more culturally in the restaurant industry?
Well, it's an excellent point. And yes, I think that what's being demanded in the restaurant industry is innovation. And the cultural change that's being required is a leadership initiated moment. Whether the restaurant, I wrote a blog on LinkedIn on this exact issue recently about how the restaurant industry is having to reinvent itself. And the culture, to me, is again more of an outcome of that reinvention than it is itself something that you target to change. So if you think of it's, and I come back to this point about how cultural change often fails because we go about changing the culture directly rather than are we actually, so think about an employee survey. You excuse me, you take an engagement survey, you get the results of the survey, and people are saying, I want more flexibility, I want more career training. Then we're going to address those topics in the survey, and that's going to change the culture. And it's like the equivalent of recooking the steak, right? For the customer to say it's fine, but will they really return to the restaurant again? So most organizations tackle culture as a retention strategy by recooking the steak, hand it off to HR versus fix the problems in the kitchen. So whenever I hear an organization's HR, and please don't take this the wrong way, but if I'm talking to the head of HR, we think we can fix the issues in our culture ourselves, I worry a little bit about that because you are knowledgeable and capable, you are motivated, but you can't fix what leaders don't own. And that's really the bottom line. They can only implement, HR can only implement the systems and the processes that support what leaders' true core values are in the organization. I know everybody that's listening that's head of HR knows this intimately. And I think that it's a fallacy for a lot of CEOs that I have worked with. They sort of hand the thing off to HR and expect them to fix it. Any culture problems or weaknesses begin with the CEO and his or her team. So,
well, I am super excited the fact that the People Strategy Forums are going to provide these solutions to help the HR leader learn or enhance their competency about being a credible activist and being able to have that business acumen to be able to align the return on investment and the metrics so that the executive leaders have true buy-in, that they're very much a part of this, aligning the culture. And I have been in many positions where I felt very much on an island. Speaking, Judy, of islands, I've been very much on an island where I could not get that executive buy-in, and it was always perceived as that HR program.
yeah.
So I think even more so than ever, how can we help the People Strategy Forums? How can we help HR leaders and people strategy leaders understand how to get that buy-in from the executive top?
Absolutely. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit at the end of my slides today. I wanted to just talk about it specifically to your point, Shar. How does culture impact retention? So this is sort of more of the top-down pyramid view on this. And I wanted to give an example. A startup company in the San Francisco area had lost 4 employees of their first 24. And the diagnosis pointed to the cultural environment, which in this case was a lack of clarity about the company's priorities and strategy. So that was kind of the biggest sort of stated root cause. And there was a lack of true understanding also about the primary forces that create culture. A CEO and a COO who truly care about people, not culture, and who demonstrate the core values in action and take a firm stand and resolving conflicts around who we are and who we should be and where we're headed. So people, increasingly talented people, vote with their feet, right? If toxic workplace cultures are really kind of becoming a thing of the past, as companies realize the work environment reaps what is sown, so bad ingredients, a chaotic kitchen will never produce good food, right? But in the wake of the COVID, leaders' true colors have revealed, in how they care for people, how they care for teams, employees have stepped up their game. So if we come back to this foundation of leadership and how much are leadership really truly showing themselves as people, right? Rather than trying to impact retention through building a culture that retains people, you have to think about it as, are we actually caring for people and their needs? So that's something that I know this is a very basic point, but I think that culture impacts retention only to the degree that leaders actually care for people, not necessarily try to create an externalized artificial environment around culture. I want to talk a little bit in a minute about some of the forces that impact and build, and because culture again is more of a collective set of agreements that are oftentimes stated or unstated. but I think it's really important to really understand that leadership builds the environment that creates the culture. So let's talk about some of the preventable.
I just want to interject, Lisa. I just want to say this. You know, the other day I picked up my daughter. She's 20 years old, and my son is 17. And we were going to head up to Estes Park and up here in Colorado. And we were on one side of the little town. And Ashley goes, "Oh, Mom, we have to go to this coffee shop. We have to go to this coffee shop and pick up some coffee." And I'm like, "Ashley, that's like 10 miles away, you know?" And she's like, "Oh, no, it's super and fantastic. The people there are just awesome." And I'm like, okay. So we drive all the way across town. We go through the little drive-through. And oh my gosh, I've never seen such an engaged group of young professionals in any age, but they were so excited. They were so excited about serving my coffee and the kind of flavor that I was going to have and everything, every single conversation. "How you doing today? Where are you going? So glad to have you." And as we're driving off, Ashley goes, "Mom, I so want to work there." And she works at Dairy Queen now. But
Awesome. That's like, a really good example. Yeah.
She's like, "There's a waiting list. You can't even get hired there because everybody in town wants that job." And I'm like, I need to talk to that CEO or HR person at that little coffee shop. What are they doing in that culture to make it such a desirable place that there's a waiting list just to get hired?
Yeah, that would be a really great question and case study, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think I'll do that.
So in fact, it just reminds me of Simon Sinek's book where he's talking about a waiter in a hotel, or rather a barista at a hotel coffee shop, and the guy works two jobs at two different hotels, same job, same kind of hours, but the person's absolutely unrecognizable in the other job. So at one place, he gets asked how he's doing, whether he needs any support by different managers, not only his manager. And he is similar to the people in Char's story. And at the other place, he says, "I'm just doing this to pay my bills." So I think that kind of sums up the importance of culture. And although it's an overused quote, but Peter Drucker did say that culture does eat strategy for breakfast, right?
Yeah, and I mean, and I think that again, it comes back to, this is no mystery. It really is about, when you think about leadership and who you're putting in leadership, there has been this historical mindset that we promote the people who are the highest level performers, right, in the business, and you put them up this ladder, and those often have resulted in toxic leadership in organizations because these people were not cut out to lead people. They're cut out to lead projects or get results on their own, but to actually really bring out the best in people is a whole different skill set. And I think that a lot of organizations, more progressive organizations, and I look forward to hearing Judy's thoughts on this, are really looking at how they can create an environment in which leadership itself is seen as a job that is about creating psychological safety, that is about creating an environment in which people's best is brought out and thriving. And that is a very, very different skill set than what is often promoted in today's companies. Can we just go to the next slide for a moment here, Sam? I wanted to just point out somewhat what Char was talking about, that this article, and I think, Sumit, I gave you the, did I give you the, I think I gave you the link to this article, so that those of you who really want to take a look at this article by Workstars talks about the 9 preventable reasons that people leave companies. And I thought this first statistic was stunning. 75% of people who voluntarily leave an organization, so this is not that they were removed through a reduction in force or through some other layoff. 75% of voluntary quits happen because of the boss and not the job itself. 65% of people say they'd take a new boss over a pay raise. Like, that is just stunning to me. This really points to the fact that we haven't really owned the bottom of the pyramid, that how we select and develop leaders in organizations is the retention strategy that we need to pay attention to most, beyond anything else that we could be doing. So these statistics are, I'm not going to go through them one by one. These are really stunning. If you need this kind of data, to support for your CEO or for your leaders about really the truth of what's happening, about why people are leaving and what we have to change in order to retain great people, the data is here. And I thought it was just a really great summary by this particular organization. Anything that you wanted to point out there, Shar? Or
yes, well, you could tell I want to say something. Yes, I have to tell you with my company, so I've exercised a whole new way of talent strategy and competency transformation. And my culture is very much about focusing on talents and development and how we're taking care of our people. We recently have engaged Sam and his team to help us do a complete revamp of our compensation processes, but we want to be smart about it. So it's not like we're just immediately overnight, we have a new compensation program, but because of our transparency and we're constantly talking about, we want to be one of the best employers, have a great culture, make this a place you really want to work, a great workplace. And by the way, we are looking at changing our compensation program and processes. And everyone goes, okay, well, there's an amount of trust. We have not, usually in my background and working with big companies and we talk about the new comp program or changes that are on the horizon, it fosters a bit of fear, worry, and concern. I have not felt any worry or concern because our employees know that we're going to take care of them. We're going to be best in class with comp team supporting us with our new comp team structure. But if it was a different type of culture, I believe we could have already felt some fallout because it's not been an overnight process. So, you really have to foster that throughout. So when you do make those changes, it doesn't have such a negative impact.
I think that's so key what you just said, Ashar, as far as we talked about many topics on this forum over the several months. And one that keeps coming up, which is just paramount to everything else, is trust. Trust in your leadership, trust in the organization, and so forth. And I imagine you've probably seen that in your work, Judy, is in environments and building teams and leaders.
Yeah, so I have a question for all of you that are listening today, and that is, what builds trust? If you want to just pop into the chat, what are you doing in your organization to actually build leaders who build trust? Because what Shar just shared as an example, maybe you could speak to that in just a minute, Shar, as well. What kind of leadership trust are you building that's created the culture, in which a person like Sam can even come in and do that analysis and have the employees trust that it's going to be beneficial to them. But that's, again, if it starts with leadership, just pop in the chat, what are the number 1 or 2 behaviors that leaders do to actually foster trust in your culture, in your organization, your experience? I'd just love to see some of those answers. And they might speak to some of these dynamics that we're seeing on this slide here, or they may be something completely separate. But I think that question is probably the starting point of every culture change that I've been a part of, is what creates trust from a leadership standpoint and what erodes it, because you're either, with every employee, you're doing one or the other. You're always either reinforcing trust, building trust, or you're eroding it by your actions, by your decisions. And sometimes, so tough decisions like what happened with COVID, there were some very difficult decisions that had to happen there. And if you had to do a reduction in force and a furlough or a layoff, that you might say sort of erodes trust in the organization. But how you go about it, how leaders conveyed and made those decisions and choices to decide whether to do a reduction in force and how they executed it, absolutely has the opportunity to buid trust.
Yes, absolutely. We're getting quite a reaction here in the chat. Active listening, listening and empathy,
yep.
Giving tough feedback, transparency is so, share the pains as well as the gains, listen, authenticity. And so I have to say, in my business, particularly during that time period, when I was having those breakdown at 3 a.m. and stressing out and worrying when, we had to shut all of our locations down. Absolutely, this one of the scariest times, because it wasn't even so much my career and my co-owners career founder of my company, it was all, 15 of my staff at the time. And, authenticity and keeping the lines of communication and talking about the honest truth that we really didn't know if all of our employees needed to be furloughed and to go on a reduction in force. So, starting to talk about the unemployment options that may be out there for them, letting them know that we were working on a PPE loan or grant that we were able to get. Luckily, I heard a lot of companies didn't take the time to do that. But really talking authentically about our circumstance and explaining that we were not going to be perfect in the process. So all those things in the chat were absolutely true. One of the other key factors I think around the trust is I have a strong personality. My co-owners both also have a strong personality. We have a tendency to want to take control and do all the talking and do all the leading. We do have a director, we do have a manager, we do have other layers of leadership that we need to build their credibility and their trust. So not always taking the spotlight and actually building up our leadership to be the voice and the communicators and to be able to have the one-on-one. So really establishing the structure. In addition, some of us like me are all over strategic, very colorful, creative. Other leaders, based upon the TMA I learned, are very much organization structure, like order. So being able to establish the communication meetings, the one-on-one meetings, the conversations, be it virtually or not, it had to be a layering of processes to build that trust. So definitely a learning process for us.
Yeah.
Right. And one thing that just to mention really quick, I know when Meredith Massey's on the line here and from ICC, and I know
I
that
was going to point that one out too. Yeah.
Yeah, and she is, we were talking about trust and having positive situations where we have to let people go. And I know Meredith has a presentation that's coming up soon. So Meredith, will you go ahead and put in the details of that so that our other listeners can listen in if they're interested in that topic?
And while that's happening, I wanted to just acknowledge in the chat how much the listening theme has shown up. And I see that over and over again in my work, that when I'm hired, oftentimes for the culture, the top of the pyramid, to fix that part of it, that a lot of my job initially is listening. This is why they've even named these group sessions or focus group sessions, listening sessions. And I think, that old adage about we have two ears and one mouth for a reason, it really holds true in this case. I still think kind of back to what leaders have been promoted for is to have the answers. And so it's really ingrained culturally, and especially in American culture, that you're only as smart as your last decision. And yet, if you actually just did this one thing and flipped the equation and thought about 80% of my time is spent asking questions. How are you? Where are you stuck? How can I help? And literally just shut your mouth and listen. Your organization culture would improve tenfold within a month. I swear to God. I really think you guys have it nailed in the chat. We don't need fancy consultants to tell you. Just listen. It's a huge, huge piece of what people are looking for. And the empathy too, listening, not just like nodding your head like a puppet, but really reflecting back the value that people in, the organization beyond your position bring. And it just helps leaders make better decisions when they do that. I just have one more piece that I wanted to share, which is kind of the meat of my point today around what are some of the early signals that you can look for and strong remedies in culturally in retention, in the retention territory. So if retaining great people is a goal of yours, these are some culture warning signs that you should be paying attention to in your organization. This is something you can certainly screenshot and share with leaders if it makes sense to you. If HR complaints are increasing in a department, that's a really big culture warning sign that you've got a leader that perhaps isn't listening or isn't trusted. performing interviews or a 360 with and around that manager, preferably with a neutral external trusted party. I think oftentimes if you're conducting those internally, in the organizations where I've been present, usually I'm brought in because the trust is broken down to the point where even HR is not seen as a neutral party. So if that's happening in your organization, it's probably a good idea to find a coach externally you trust. If survey responses have dipped, so if you're doing engagement surveys and you're used to 80, 70, 80% response rates and all of a sudden you're getting half, that's probably signaling trust is low. People don't trust. I hear this all the time in the culture surveys I do. This won't be anonymous. I'm not going to bother. So really kind of getting beyond the survey and conducting spot interviews and focus groups that are constructed as trustworthy and neutral, very important remedy. If your Glassdoor ratings are slipping, so I don't know how many of you pay attention to Glassdoor, you know, it's a little bit tricky in that it's sort of like a customer review. Customers will complain more quickly than they will add value or a positive review. So if you're seeing that slipping, pay attention. You might think it's just one disgruntled ex-employee, but where there's smoke, there's fire. If one person is feeling it, probably there are a few more inside that are feeling it and just haven't been willing to speak up publicly. This next one, oh my goodness, Uncle Joe is such a nice guy. So you know that one leader who's ineffective, who's in the wrong job, but he's such a nice guy. I hear this all the time, over and over and over again. It's a tough situation to be in. Sometimes they are literally a relative, you know, in a smaller company. And so I see that number one thing destroying culture more than probably any other combined factors, that you've got one or more leaders that are in that nice guy category, but they're either, and I say nice guy, meaning that people use that term, not I saying that term, but people will say, well, he's such a nice guy. And usually it's the leaders around him that are saying it, not the people that work for him or her. Take action. Coaching, reassignment, separation, risk losing credibility and trust across the culture. I see that one all the time. It's almost always when I come in, I feel for people because they're almost always pointing to one or two Uncle Joes in the company. The gloss over syndrome is a little bit related to this. Disagreements or confusion on a team or department are met with, we're fine, no need to worry from leaders. This creating a clear the air forums where leaders are coached to listen and ask clarifying questions. That's really, really essential. Not to, you know, a culture that at that foundation has leadership who are open to the truth, who are open to hearing tough news or bad news or the reality of what's happening. If you're a pilot in the air at 30,000 feet flying the airplane, you desperately need to know what's happening on the ground before you land the plane. And that is part of what I see missing in a lot of organizations, is that leaders are flying at 30,000 feet. They see a different kind of view and they're not communicating with the ground in terms of what's really happening in the front lines of the business. Promotions are rigged here. Ooh, that's a big one. That's a huge one. And if that dynamic is happening in your organization where people don't feel like there's a fair promotion process, it's going to make a huge difference in terms of the ability to retain great people, because people want that more than anything. They want to grow, even if it's not just up the ladder, as we've been talking about the last few forums. Up is not the only way. So those are a few thoughts I have about culture warning signs and some of the remedies.
I just would like to make a couple comments about that. I absolutely agree. I will also say about HR complaints, that is a serious warning sign if the culture goes silent. And, you know, there are going to be HR complaints that occur, but what's really concerning is if people don't feel safe and have the psychological safety to be able to bring forward their concerns to that particular resource. So that is one thing. Uncle Joe, that could be Uncle Sally or Aunt Sally.
Uncle Sally.
Yeah.
Aunt Sally.
Yeah, Aunt Sally or whoever. I would just say that there is a level of favoritism, and that there are individuals or leaders, very ineffective, very toxic leaders that manage up well, and that are favored and appreciated by senior executive leaders without any acknowledgement with the real happenings at the cultural level. And I would also say that working for companies that had really expensive employee surveys, really became a percentage of getting the survey done. The participation rate was more important than really making a cultural shift with that survey.
But they're afraid to speak up if they're working for that.
Well, yeah, I worked with one organization. They had a 90% participation rate with every employee survey, thanks to someone like myself and my team. But in the end, it was not effective at all because people were just checking the box just to get their manager off their back about getting the survey done at the participation level. So it really ended up being more of a toxic hammer than really doing something positive for the culture. So those are just some of my thoughts.
Yeah, once again, trust, if the employee base doesn't believe that the survey is going to make any difference or for the future, then you're not going to put any effort into it. Or
worse, they don't trust its anonymity.
Right.
And that's another big part of it, is even if you have an external survey company that is administering the survey, if there's lack of trust in the organization, you're going to see low response rates.
Yeah, and it's just crazy. I've seen trust be so bad at some organizations that, I've been brought in as a third party to get the real truth out of these organizations. And still, after I tell them, it's going to be completely private. I mean, you can be candid with me. Still, they're not feeling comfortable. They're still telling me that just the stuff that they want to share. So it's just fascinating how scared some people are, and it's horrible. It's horrible to work in an environment like that.
Yeah, I have had. I don't know what I attribute it to, some success in being on the phone one-on-one in interviews with people by phone. And for some reason, the phone actually creates just enough distance. And, the way I tee up my interviews with within an organization with its people, I think tends to convey nothing will be shared that you don't want to have shared. So if you're telling me something on a story level, I'll stop typing, I will stop taking notes, but I want you to feel heard. And that has unearthed, I have a lot of files on my computer that are probably like, don't hack my system, because the stories that I have heard about what people are dealing with on the leadership level are, really the result of these culture warning signs. I've seen all of them, but in the end, that's why I came to the conclusion that culture itself cannot be affected directly. That you can if you've got a healthy trust system in the organization, but there's just so many stories of people feeling discounted all the way up to literally abused emotionally in organizations that I think we have created, especially, and I'm speaking for American culture now more than, sort of broader world culture, but we have created, and Submit, maybe you can, weigh in with your own thoughts on this, but I think we've created this expectation that leadership is a authoritative role of power rather than a role of cultivating people's excellence. And that's my biggest concern. That I try and address when I talk to companies about culture, is that it cannot start with tapping into a cultural arena where you're going to sit in a room, and leaders love to do this. They love to sit in a room and wordsmith the core values and attach behaviors to them. And I tell them all the time that just don't put anything out that you're not willing to live yourself.
I couldn't agree more with what you're saying, Lisa. So at lower levels or at entry-level manager level, I see a lot of people talking up leadership abilities by saying that I think this person has the right DNA to be a leader. He or she knows how to get work done through people. So, I mean, that's an expectation you're setting right from the word go, that you'll grow as a leader as long as you can extract some amount of output from people. So if that's the kind of leaders you're trying to grow in the system, that's what you will get eventually. So you'll get hard taskmasters who are carrying a stick around to beat people with. You're not really getting people who are growing leaders in the system. And even in the Indian context, a lot of our management practices in the current scenario are based on the Western world. So I don't see that stark a difference. The great thing is that with sites like Glassdoor, companies are becoming more cognizant of the fact that their employer brands are out in the open. So people can go to Glassdoor, Payscale, even LinkedIn, see what people are, what employees and ex-employees are saying, and maybe learn more than they would learn through supposedly anonymous engagement surveys.
Agree.
Well, this
I'm
is
really looking
excellent.
forward to
We really appreciate your conversation, Lisa. So obviously, individuals can meet up with you and have a discussion with you, right?
Absolutely, yes. Happy to answer any questions or talk to anybody about this subject that's interested. I'm super excited to hear Judy's take on this subject because, you know, I have just a little bit of the story, but.
Right.
Yeah, so Judy's a leadership expert in developing leaders. So I'd love to hear how this is done in the Caribbean. So Judy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, and thank you, Lisa. Before I say anything, I just want you to know that it's the same thing that's here, that how people see leadership. They think it's more positional than anything else. So they use their position as the authority to get things done, and that way there is absolutely no discretionary effort. And one thing I realize that leaders miss is that they don't understand that discretionary effort is what really causes your company to grow. So thank you for having me. My name is Judy McCutcheon. I am from the Caribbean. I am originally from Trinidad and Tobago, but I now live in Grenada. I've lived in Grenada for the past 10 years, and before that, I lived in Belize for 10. So I worked for large corporations in the Caribbean. I've done consulting very early on in my career, but in 2016, I was managing a group of insurance companies, and I just got tired. And the same thing that we're talking about, it's about leaders who didn't get it. And I really lost complete trust in my managing director. And so I really could not be effective anymore. So I left without having a plan. I had absolutely no plan, but I left. And then I decided, well, I just helped them I just helped them create close to $1 million profit in one division that they hadn't had any profit in for a long time. So maybe I can do this on my own. So I started my consultancy in August, not without without fear, because I was really scared, not knowing what to expect, because in the Caribbean, a lot of our companies are family-owned businesses, and with family-owned businesses, they don't seem to think that they need help. So they think that they have all the expertise on the inside, and it's not necessarily so. But we've had some good good clients throughout. So we hope when the pandemic started, of course, everything went down because everything is shut down and nobody's going anywhere, but it just now started coming back up because we don't have any cases on island, and so we don't have any restrictions in terms of moving around. So we have no curfew, we have nothing. So that is just starting to come back on stream.
Judy, do you think that my experience is that family-owned businesses need help more? Not maybe.
They do need a lot more help, because what I have found is that a lot of the kids who end up in the business don't necessarily go off to study to get any kind of technical expertise, you know. They just come with the attitude, this is my father's business, this is my mother's business, and this is what it is. And they really help to create such terrible, terrible cultures. So we do have a lot of businesses here and in other places that I've worked, because I also did some work in Haiti. It really is the same thing everywhere with family-owned businesses. And of course, our economy isn't as robust, so people just tend to stay in jobs and perform the minimum and then leave. So there are some organizations where by the time it's 4 o'clock, because we would work 8 to 4, by the time it's 4, the entire office is just completely empty because everybody is gone.
Yes, I imagine also with family businesses, there's always, I mean, you have constant transitions that are happening, you know, since the one generation goes and the next generation has to come in and doing that smoothly. I mean, imagine that, you know, there's a lot of value you can help companies just in doing that.
Yeah, with the transition. If we can get them to realize, yes, I need help, but we get in there. It's a process, but we are getting there. We now get to understand you do periodic job evaluations to ensure that your jobs are fair and people are being paid correctly for the job that they're doing. Because you know, you start off on one job and your job description says something different and you are doing something completely different. So now we're getting into that space. So hopefully we'll get there. We'll get there one day. We're about 10 years behind the rest of the world, but we'll get there. Yes, so, all right. Okay, so today I just want to talk about how you retain and engage your employees with development opportunities. One of the things that I have found is that training and development is always there. It's second. It's not a priority. It's nothing strategic with a lot of companies. So I'll just kind of give you something and talk about how it happens in our region. So I want to look at what is happening currently now and what should be the differentiators or what the differentiators are, because right now it is more we're talent based, we're very knowledge based. It's not so much the hard technical skills that we're looking at people's knowledge. So we are a knowledge based economy. We are also very service based, right? But for me, one of the biggest differentiators is a company's culture, their engagement, and what companies miss a lot is that their biggest competitive advantage, their only competitive advantage, as a matter of fact, is their human capital, because products and services are easily replicated. So you come up with a product today and I could come up with a product very similar in the next couple of months because of technology. So your human, your people is what gives you that competitive advantage over the next organization. So I wanted to just highlight and emphasize the culture and engagement, right? And I really enjoyed Lisa's Lisa's conversation, where, you know, people think that culture is just this thing that isn't owned by the leaders, but that it's, like she said, it's a little HR project. And once you look at it as a little HR project, then you are not going to get any kind of buying or any real change happening, because the leaders don't own the project. And anything that has to be organizational wide, it must be the leaders that own it. And I believe that, well, not I believe, it's just simply true that culture sets the tone for the organization, right? How people work together, how decisions are made, what behaviors get rewarded, how people are promoted. You know, that is what your culture says. And if your culture is one where it's not stunting people's growth, then you have a great chance of retaining, especially your top people. And one of the things that leaders need to pay attention to is the fact that only their top people leave. The rest of people who just doing the bare minimum, they are the ones that stay consistently. You have no problems with them.
Right.
The top people are the ones that just leave consistently. And I was reading a report by Gallup that says, you know, there's a direct link between an employee's understanding of the organization's purpose, its culture, and its profitability. So they really need to understand that, you know, you may have a company that is making a lot of money. They have a toxic culture. So you can imagine how much money that's been left on the table. If only the culture was a little better, then they would be making a lot more than they are. And when the survey went on to say that when employees are better aligned with your organization, its culture and its purpose, etc., there's a 41% decrease in absenteeism and a 33% increase in quality. Imagine what a 33% increase in quality can do for your organization.
Right. So Judy, just a quick question. So when you go into, you mentioned that a lot of the companies you're dealing with, they don't realize that there's a problem a lot of times. But if there is an issue with the culture and they become aware of that because they're losing some of their top talent, and what are the first things that you do when you interact with them to help them realize and also be motivated to make change?
So we had a regional company who hired us to do some work for them. And one of the first things we did, which is really, for me, very important, we did a survey of the staff. And it was anonymous. I didn't know who said what. And we said to them, it's anonymous. We had a 95% response rate, and the responses were as true and as possible. And I mean, it was almost as if these employees just wanted somebody to ask them so that they can talk. And based on that, because, you know, the leaders tell you one thing is a problem, but the employees really, once you listen to them, you know what the problems are. And that was able to help us really craft a solution for this company. And I am really happy that what they did, a lot of the recommendations that we gave them, they implemented it. And I mean, it's a slow process, but you're beginning to see changes within the organization. So it has to be that the leadership team really wants to make things a lot better.
Yeah, it was funny because I did this review at a company once. And the CEO was like, okay, we want to figure out what's going on with the staff. And so I went and did an assessment like you did. And I went to all the staff and we got their feedback. and it brought it back to the CEO, and he was like, oh gosh, this really hurts. This feedback really hurts. And he goes, yeah, but we've identified the issue, sir. Is a lot of them don't like the style that your leadership style, and we need to maybe get you some coaching and stuff like that. And he goes, well, that's not going to change. So we're going to have to figure out something else. I was like, oh man. So yeah, there's sometimes you can help, sometimes you can't.
Sometimes you can't. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And what I always do is that I would always put that in writing. Whatever they tell me, I put it in writing, and that it's there. You know, one of the things, even when we look at how the different islands have handled COVID, we see some, clear leadership totally out front, clear leadership in how the situation was handled. And then, of course, because you realize that the leaders really wanted to ensure that the people remain safe. Because one of the things we know is that in the Caribbean, we do not have a healthcare system that can handle even 100 cases. We don't. So they've had to handle the situation properly. They wanted to, so that there is not a burden on the healthcare system. So some islands handled it perfect, and some islands just didn't.
So Judy, wouldn't you think that it's a matter of changing the type of conversation that you're having relative to an employee's lack of engagement or performance? And oftentimes as a leader, we focus so much on the productivity and the number of widgets or the number of cases that we do in an hour or that type of thing, and really don't talk about what's truly motivating, what is it, an actual talent, what is a real driver to excellent performance, and changing the context of the conversation. So it's deeper than just, here's a performance evaluation, here's a goal, here's a number that I expect you to achieve in a certain amount of time. Do you think that needs to change as far as how we're communicating with our staff?
That definitely needs to go out the door without a doubt. Leaders need to start to see their people, and that's what they're not doing. They're not seeing them as people, and that, I think, is really one of the biggest problems. You see, we promote people, yeah, and we promote people without giving them proper resources that they need. So I always use this analogy, and I say to people, not because you have a cashier that's an excellent cashier means that she's going to be a good supervisor. So you don't just promote her to supervisor without giving her the tools that she needs. You know, this company had asked me to come in. They had a manager that they were having. They didn't know what to do with him because the staff were just complaining. So they asked me if I could come in and, you know, just kind of observe for a little while to see what the problem was. And I really followed him around and see what he was doing and so on. And then in the end, I said to them, listen, this is not a guy to lead people. He just isn't, that's not his, it's not his core personality. He is not a people leader. And if you put him confirm him in that position, he's going to fail. And I believe that companies need to start setting up their managers to win. They mustn't set them up for success.
I used to.
So you have to, yeah, and you have to put them in the right.
Oh, go ahead, Judy, sorry.
No, that's okay. And one of the things that they don't do here a lot is that they do not use psychometric testing for job fit. A lot of them will do a personality test, but that is so different, as you know, from doing it for proper job fit based on the job. We don't use that a lot here. So we're really trying to push, that right now to get people to put people in the right jobs, because it is one of the levers of engagement. Because if I'm in a job that I wake up every morning and think, oh my God, I wouldn't want to be there, you know?
Well, or I hate my job itself because that whole.
I know. Because for me, once I start to feel like that, I know it's time for me to leave. Really, because there's nothing there. I'll go to work and you won't get anything from me at all.
I used to talk about that as the phenomena of asking rabbits to climb trees. That it, you know, if you are asking a rabbit to climb a tree, that's
or swim
or swim.
And then it's not going to happen. Yeah.
And I love that analogy because it, you know, we talked for months about the TMA method, and it's really been exciting to me to see what you're talking about with a psychometric analysis of really taking my talents and drives and, you know, sort of seeing how to get that glove fit organizationally so that the rabbit is really running the territory, you know,
that it's supposed to run. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big part of the retention piece. I mean, it can't overcome toxic leadership, but it's huge.
Yeah. And sometimes with toxic leadership, you just have to, you can't fix it, you know? You can't fix it.
You know, I have a rabbit that was on my team, and you know, he was kind of, you think rabbits are quiet, but he certainly was vocal on his texting and complaining every day. And you know, it came down to the right fit, the actual position. And it was great to give him a job interest assessment and really analyze. It was interesting because this individual hates sales, absolutely hates sales, but actually had a real deep interest in research and compliance and administrative side of our work, and really doing a deep dive on what this individual to be happier, and ultimately transitioned him, and now he is thriving with his new rabbit environment.
And that is exactly what we need to do as leaders. You need to see your people. You must see your people.
The entire team is happier. His leader is happier. Everyone's happier.
Because he's not complaining anymore.
Yeah.
Absolutely no complaint from him.
Right.
Really, really amazing. And engagement in our scenario, right? We think that engagement is a couple of feel-good activities and initiatives. So we plan a little fun day, or we plan some team building activity, and we assume that that is what engagement is. But when an employee development, performance and development needs are met, just like Shah, just like your rabbit buddy, when the performance and development needs are met, they become emotionally and psychologically attached to the workplace and to their work. I mean, if we're looking at needs, and we put like Maslow hierarchy in context of work, you see that once they have those lower level needs met, they are going to really run your nation. There's not one person out there who can say something bad about you and they let it pass, because they are your raving fans. They are total enthusiasts for you, right? So what leaders need to understand is that they think that engagement is the same as engaging employees, but engagement is like the end result of the process. People say to you, I want some customer service training. Customer service training in and of itself is useless, completely useless. It has to be the end result of something. And it's the same thing with engagement. I believe that it is, engaging your staff using a strategy that actually drives performance. And if you have a culture that is enabling, you people develop relationships at work, and it's out of those relationships that you have a lot of engagement being born. So, and when we have employees that are really engaged, you see all the creativity and so much innovation happens when an employee is properly engaged. And so when we look at employees, we have to see them as consumers of the workplace, not as, you see, like how we see our customers. We think our customers are the most important part of our organization, but I think that we're completely wrong. Totally wrong. I believe that our employees are the most important. So we have to stop treating them like transactions. You know, in the Caribbean, we say a lot of foolishness, and I absolutely call it foolishness when people say, well, they're a dime a dozen. Your employees are not a dime a dozen. And I have heard HR manager refer to staff as these people. And I've had to have a conversation with her. Because once you, that's the feeling you have about them, they pick that feeling up and they know. So you get nothing out of them. You know, what they want lasting personal relationships. Some of my best relationships now are relationships from places where I worked.
But that's that dime a dozen mentality, Judy, is what creates the I'm only here for a paycheck mentality. They're directly related to one another.
That's
And,
right.
you know, so if that's all you care about is having somebody who is coming to work just to collect a paycheck, not serve your customers, then that mentality works for you.
And then that is where your employee churn happens rapidly. You know, it's like your employees are like on a hamster wheel consistently. You know, they're just turning over and over. But once there's a culture, a strong culture that encourages relationships, then I think that that organization is on its way to really becoming an employer of choice, or as I like to say, a world-class organization. Because I look at it from our context in the Caribbean, and we have to understand that we don't operate in silos. We're not in a silo, because we are part of the global economy, right? We have consultants coming here from everywhere. I worked for a consulting company out of the US at one time, and I used to go to do work in the US because I had a skill that the other consultants didn't have. So every time they came up on that issue, I would go to do the job. So we're not local, we are absolutely global. So we have to kind of embrace the whole global phenomena that's happening.
Well, and
So you want to say something?
I was just going to say to this point that, you know, there was this comment was made in the chat as well, that you're getting increasingly more of the younger employees with the digital world that we live in, and especially since COVID, where, you know, 90% of America went remote overnight. And I know that's globally, I don't know what the statistics are, but it was a pretty big deal. That people, and I hear this all the time from, we talk about the millennials a lot, but even Gen Z coming into the workforce, that the freelance work, the remote work, the ability to drive my own time and own my own time is a mindset that is changing the labor supply. So people don't just come to work for a paycheck anymore. They'll go have a side hustle, 2-3 side hustles, you know, or they'll just switch jobs really frequently. In my day, that was a resume killer, right?
Yeah, and the thing is that employees are no longer, they're not going to walk through your organization's door and walk out 30 years later. That doesn't happen anymore. So you don't have long-term employees. Employees want alignment. They want a company that can give them the kind of lifestyle they want to live. So they're looking at that is community oriented, people centered and focused. And if your organization doesn't offer that, then you are going to have a very hard time with the new people in the workforce. Definitely, definitely.
True. You're not
And
just selling
I
products
believe that
and services anymore,
Yeah.
right? You're selling people.
Absolutely.
it's people. And once employers understand that, once they put people at the core, at the center of what they do, that helps to engender loyalty. In your discussion, Lisa, you were asking about trust. If I don't feel that I belong, I am not going to trust you. If I'm not a big part of what you do, then I am never going to trust you. You will never get my discretionary effort because I don't trust you. And that is what really engenders loyalty. And we know what happens when your employees are loyal. They give you discretionary effort and your profit increases. Yeah.
You know, this whole employees as consumer of the workplace reminds me of that very popular show, The Undercover Boss.
Yeah.
And, you know, being able to walk in the shoes of your employees and literally see, I mean, wouldn't it be great if we really could see the life of an employee as a consumer in the workplace and the environment that we set and the feedback that we're giving and the tools, the resources, and the support along the way, the lack of communication or too harsh of communication.
Yeah, definitely.
So Judy, so when I imagine you see a lot of small businesses and that that have this, they're just starting to come to the notion that, hey, I should treat my people should come first. So what are the first things that you do, and are there common themes that you particularly see that you do to help them realize that, and what are the first steps that they should take?
So I have a client right now, and I tell everybody that I absolutely love the president of that company. I say that to his wife all the time. I absolutely love your husband because he is so forward thinking and so focused on how he wants his staff to develop. His motto is, I want to make people. So once he has any little rumblings, he's going to call me and say, there may be an issue. Can you come and check it out? And of course, my first thing, I'm doing something for them right now, and they wanted to change some of their processes and the procedures. And I say to him, well, we can't do it just like that. So I need to talk to everybody who is involved currently in these processes that you want to change, see where the pain points are, and then I want to hear what their solutions are, because most times they do have the solutions. They really do have the solutions if we listen to them. They because they're in it day in, day out, they kind of know what works easiest and best. And then as a consultant, I just kind of help to fix it properly and let them go. But definitely the leader has to own it, no matter how you look at it. If the leader doesn't own it, it doesn't happen.
It is interesting you mentioned about the process and so forth, and I just brought up a thought I had. I work in my role as a compensation consultant, and I work a lot with data, and learned a lot of mistakes through that and through the years of the butterfly effect. Right? We all heard about the butterfly effect, and something happening with just a small species, and 100 million years ago will change the world today, type of thing. Well, it happens in our businesses too. And I had a situation where there was a problem with just their data set and their computer, and it seemed very benign. And it's like, oh well, we'll just change the title of this to that. Well, unbeknownst, just changing the title of one data point impacted all these reports that were used across the organization. And everybody's like, on what's going on here? Who changed this? And so it's so important. It's so important to look at those interdependent.
Thing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So how do you retain, right? And I believe that one of the biggest thing is that, you know, retention of your good talent is key. Again, it's only your C and D list that remains with you, right? So again, the use of psychometric tools, right? Do you have the right people in the right roles, right? And something that we must really always be particular about is job fit. And I always say that, you know, job fit. If I'm in a job, if I'm a rabbit doing a fish's job, I am going to be completely unhappy all the time. I will have no passion because I don't like water. I don't have a gill that I could swim underwater. So what are you putting me in that position for? I worked for my last job as the branch manager, and when I got there, I remember when I went to sign the contract, because they didn't interview me at the office. So when I went to sign the contract and I walked in, my first impression was, oh my God, I think I made the wrong choice. Because you can actually feel the tension in the air. It was amazing. And I say to people, I never started my job, my actual work day, until everybody left. Because a big thing for me was talking to everybody, making sure people are okay, making sure they have the right tools. I mean, my door was just revolving completely. Everybody came in with an issue. And the problem was that the previous manager never allowed them to make decisions or to make mistakes. So every little thing they came to me for. And eventually they come and I would say to them, okay, so what would you do? And they always had the solution. And I would say, okay, go and do it. So then little by little, they started making decisions without having to come to me. And of course, they made mistakes. And I mean, I just say, well, okay, how can we learn from this mistake? Because making a mistake is one thing, but learning from it is what is the important thing. And that is how you get growth. So having the job fit, making sure that people's roles are clear. I mean, nothing like when you're not too sure what needs to happen. You actually, I think, don't do anything. And hiring right, it's just really, really important. And sometimes we have to hire, not sometimes, I believe that we need to hire for attitude and we can train for skill. You know, hiring somebody for customer service, for example, you don't need anybody with a degree for customer service. All you need is somebody with a service attitude, and then you train them up in what is required. The next thing is letting people have that sense of belonging. You know, like in our current situation, I mean, people are coping with so much. There is homeschooling, there is sick parents, there is so many things happening now that people aren't coping. And if you don't organize some form of constant check-in, and what do you do? I mean, I was listening to the radio yesterday, and the statistics show that 800,000 people a year die by suicide. I mean, people, and this COVID has just really made the situation a lot worse than it is. And one of the other things that we have to remember in the checking in process is that HR professionals are also people, because they're the ones who do a lot of the check-ins, but there's nobody really, there's not a system around them for checking and to check on them and how they're doing. So we also have to remember them as well, and create some sort of safety net for them. The next thing in terms of trust, do you have open lines of communication? Can your employees truly say how they feel without any form of retribution? Any? Are your managers still operating with a big stick policy? Are they taskmasters rather than coaches, right? What is the feedback loop that you're having with your people? Because I think it's very important that you have that constant feedback rather than the once a year. Nothing really deflates an employee. Like you go to an evaluation process in December and they tell you about something you did in January. You know, it really is. I think that is very, very self-defeating. So there must be that constant feedback loop. The culture must be such where people feel psychologically safe. And once you have that safety, then you get high levels of creativity and innovation from your staff. Training and coaching, I'll tell you this. So I think that a lot of companies treat the training budget as many people treat their personal insurance. You know, when you have a crisis, that premium is the first thing that you drop from your budget. Mm-hmm. When really and truly, well, I don't know about the US, but I can tell you in the Caribbean, once you have a personal insurance, like a life insurance, right? And you have any little bit of crisis, it is the first thing that drops off from people's budget, when really and truly it should be the last thing. And that is how a lot of companies treat their training budget, as an afterthought. It's, okay, well, we're having this crisis, let us cut our training budget and increase our marketing budget. So there is no real importance on the development of the employee, right?
Yeah, that's so true. And I know, Judy, we only have about 10 more minutes. So I know I would like to hear about that, the event that you put on you know, the end of the year. So very important training and development opportunity, right?
Yeah. So I'm just gonna kind of run. Fourth one is know what are the drivers that causes your turnover, really, in terms of your employee churn. Look at them. And then the fifth thing is look in, these are the development opportunities, right? You know, can your people study and you give them back their money, or can you pay for them, right? Look at soft skills versus hard skills. And I believe that your soft skills really help you to do your hard skills, right? There's mentoring opportunities, there's shadowing, there's internship. You can assign people across projects, and of course, there's recognition, right? So those are for me, the development opportunities that really doesn't cost a whole lot for a company to implement for their people, right? And then this was just the life cycle of the employee. And I'm saying thank you. And let me just come to our, we're having a leadership conference, and it is on November 19th and 20th. It's all virtual. Last year was our first year we had it, and it input this year is virtual. It is really a way to help build leadership capacity by learning from leaders who are doing absolutely fantastic, great jobs at their thing. So we're looking at how do we change the way we lead right now in these current times, because the traditional leadership style won't work in what we currently have. So
That's great. Well,
that's
Judy,
the
this is fantastic. I love the disruptive leadership concept and the future of leadership. So this is a fantastic opportunity. And just to echo what you're talking about, the overlaying of talent management strategy needs to be a very complex process for leaders to look through all those different layers that need to create that culture and that retention environment, and to be able to break it down into those aspects from the employee point of view of how we hire, how we develop, how we look at our succession management, how do we look at career mobility, how do we look at perhaps outplacement. That whole cycle in the career perspective is so critical. And I think that a lot of HR leaders and learning leaders right now are really struggling with that, just because what you said, there's lack of resources. A lot of companies are really worried about their finances right now, being able to sustain in their business. But the challenge is when you lose that talent, it's only going to lead potentially to that business demise.
Yep.
And so it's challenging for us like HR leaders to be able to translate that. So what I'm hearing is you have some potential low cost, innovative, out of the box type of thinking that can be learned or supported in an organization, and that we can take advantage of talking to you personally or attending one of your events to learn more.
Yes. Yeah.
And so in the leadership conference that you have there, Judy, I mean, can you tell us a little bit about the speakers you're planning on having?
All right, so we really do have some fabulous speakers in my estimation. We have our university here in the Caribbean is the University of the West Indies. I don't know if you've heard about it, but our university is in the top 5 universities globally, and they have been voted that 3 years in a row. Right? So we're having the Vice Chancellor of that university, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles. He will be talking to us, and he will be talking about the theme of the conference. We're gonna have some managing directors. We do have a managing director of Unilever, but the Caribbean office. They are based in Trinidad, and actually he was voted the region's best CEO. And so he will be talking to us, and he is going to be talking to us about the future of work and strategies that we can implement to get moving and not be stagnant in this current time. We're going to be looking at how you lead in a virtual world, because now you have so many companies who have this blended situation of work and home, and how do you lead that successfully, because now you have a lot of schools who are staying online and parents have to work. So how companies manage that is important. So we're going to be talking about that. We'll also be talking about how do you lead, how do you communicate effectively, right? And how do you lead in the midst of chaos? Because this is one thing that nobody was prepared for. Absolutely nobody. How do you lead? And Lisa, one of the big things that we're going to be talking about is what are the qualities of that makes for a great organizational culture, because we really do need to start to change the way we lead, really change our culture around. So those are some of the topics that we'll be talking about.
Well, we sincerely appreciate your time today, Judy. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you and your ideas and approaches. And as we wrap up here, we're in the last couple of minutes of our People Strategy Forum. And so we just want to thank all of our participants, and thank you for all those that have chatted giving us some links, information, insight. We deeply appreciate it. If you did take the time to check the box to have a 15-minute with any one of us or the TMA assessment, we'd love for you to get to know us, and also LinkedIn with us, connect with us, because we're all over social media as well. We have many engaging articles and information. And so next week, Sam, what is our topics for next week? I don't have them on my screen here.
So next week we're going to be talking to Barbara Brooks, and she's going to be mentioning we're going to talk about ageism and so forth in the workplace. We're focusing on more diversity and so forth, and so we should hear about that. And Sumit, I believe you're going to have a chat with us as well. Will you tell us a little bit about your topic?
Sure, Sam. So I'll be talking about how to up your talent management engine and accommodate inclusion and diversity into it. So how does inclusion really gear up your talent management to give you the leaders of the future?
Fantastic.
Great.
Well, thank you so much. We're so excited to hear the next session. So please share. Please go ahead and look at our compteam.net. You'll see all of our prior recordings. Talk about some tools and resources, as well as some other excellent speakers. They're all there under People Strategy Forum, and we used to do an HR forum. So we want to thank everyone. Please be safe. Take care of your people. Attract and retain the very best talent. And keep coming back every week to see us. And we thank all of you, and we'll wrap up today's session, and we'll see you next week, Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Bye.